So thanks so much for joining us, and welcome to this special Anzac edition of InFocus Recouched.
Yes, we'll hear some of the lesser known stories of the First and Second World Wars today.
Wow.
Well, they're a little better known now actually, thanks to some great books. We'll be seeing what their authors have to say today.
Yep, and we'll also hear some very useful advice from our family life educator, Trafford Fisher, on how to be great.
Great, okay, sounds good to me. Let's kick off though by reliving this interview with World War II survivor Paul Chesler. Well, this year, 2015, we remember the 70th anniversary of one of the darkest periods of human history, and that is the Second World War. And here with me today is a man who lived through that as a young boy and a teenager, and that is Pastor Paul Chesler. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Now, you've done what a lot of people have been afraid to do, and that's to actually talk about the difficulties that went on in your family and in your town during the Second World War. It's very, very painful stories for some people, but you've actually written this book, No Heil Hitler, which I found very, very powerful. Can you give us just some idea of what the Nazi occupation meant for you and your family in your village in Poland?
Now, when the Nazi occupation came, 1939, and soon we were targeted as a first church, because they closed our churches. There came a SS trooper to our church on Sabbath morning, and he said, you can have only one sermon, one hymn, one prayer. And then they never permitted to come here again for any worshipping purpose.
Wow.
And they associated us with the Jewish people because we kept the seventh-day Sabbath, not the first day of the
So your church was a Seventh-day Adventist church?
Yeah, we were Adventist church.
Were other churches in your village closed down?
Oh yeah, there are plenty of other churches. But we were mostly focused because they felt they kept the Saturday as the Jews, so they must be related together. And they accused us about that. Not only the German, but many others.
Boy, okay.
And so that started the problem.
Yeah. So during this period, I mean, your family was separated. Your father had to go away for a while. Your brother had to go away for a while. You even had to run away for 2 years to be a shepherd off in a mountain. That would have been a hard time for your family.
Very hard time, and mainly the reason was that we were brought up as Christian, and the greeting Heil Hitler comes from Heiland, which means Savior. And my father taught us that we should never, this is a sort of blasphemy, and we should never use that as a greeting. So we said good morning, guten Tag, guten Abend, guten Morgen, but never Heil Hitler.
Which is why you named your book
That's why. That's the reason for the title.
Yeah. Your mother in particular was very strong on this, wasn't she?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, boy. So can you just tell us maybe one of those experiences that just sticks in your mind as maybe when you might have been very afraid and you saw, I guess, God come through for you? Because I know time and time again you felt God was with you through this period.
Now, there are five stories which I would call now or never.
Yeah.
We have to speak to God now or never. But the one, it was very, very first one, which was very frightening. When on Friday evening we had a Sabbath beginning worship as a family, and suddenly there was the German Gestapo with the soldier surrounded our house and knocked strongly the door. My father opened the door. Where have you been? Where have you been? And he said, we were inside. He slapped him at the face because he said, you are lying. Now, we didn't know what was going on. And they put us together, the family, against the wall in one room. And the German SS trooper with the machine gun and the other were searching the house and the farm around the bars where the cows were and everywhere, because they noticed that we are harboring somebody.
They thought maybe there were some Polish partisans or freedom fighters who were hiding on your property.
That's right. They have seen somebody. We later found out. And so as he kept us against the gun, covering us against the machine gun, every now and then he said, this is your last day. This is your last moment. So the kids started crying, Mommy, Mommy, Mommy. And he shouted again and he said, stop these kids crying and talking, because that will only speed up the end. So Mommy tried to cool them down, but that was really shocking. We felt that this is our family end time. And that was unbelievable painful. Not knowing any future. So that my mother breathed a prayer to God and said, God, now we need you. That's the end. And the situation changed.
Okay.
And it's described in the book.
Yeah,
Which
boy.
I cannot go into detail, but the reader will find it.
I mean, they're incredible stories. I mean, your house was, how far from the Auschwitz camp?
About 80 kilometers,
About 80
75.
kilometres. So sometimes you had people coming through your town who'd actually escaped from Auschwitz,
Oh, yeah.
which I didn't even know happened. And one man who was actually from your town who you prayed for, and he was actually managed to be released, that's a miracle in my book.
That was our neighbor.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I went to Auschwitz when I was 17. I visited there when I was in Poland. You also visited Auschwitz at about the same age after the war.
Yeah.
And you said you found that very traumatic, and you struggled a lot with, I guess today we would call it post-traumatic stress disorder, would you call it?
The complex of fear. After the war, I couldn't, I was going down the street and somebody from the opposite side approached me. I turned left or right into the snow or forest because he's a potential killer. That was the complex which I have to work for a long time to release myself.
But it seems it was love and beauty and
right.
God that really made the difference to you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, it was a girl, wasn't it?
That little girl, and I thank God for that. That experience changed completely my outlook upon world and people and upon God.
That you realise there is good in the world and there is beauty in the world. You went on to be a pastor for many years. Do you find that the painful times that you went through and the trauma that you felt was helpful in relating to other people who were going through hard times?
Oh yeah, in a case that I could understand better people, that helped me. In another case, it was that I was more patient with people because somebody was patient with me.
Yeah, sure. Now, this book actually is the winner of Australia's National Seniors Literary Prize.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Now, I had a friend who was helping me a little bit, and he knew that this organization in Australia every year evaluate books, manuscripts.
It's unpublished manuscript. Yeah, okay. And
they received 55 different manuscripts from different writers from all over Australia. And mine was one. But when I was submitting this manuscript, I was advised to delete a little bit this, as they call it, the religious propaganda.
Not so religious, please, they said. No, okay.
Because they will not be happy with it. This book will be not evaluated as much worse. And I said, no way. I will betray my God, I will betray my friends, my family, many people who are looking to me as describing the intervention of God in their life.
Oh, that's right. I mean, this is a man who stood up to the Nazis. I mean, a couple of book editors aren't going to make you afraid, are they?
And so can you imagine when we were invited for the presentation meeting of the book which won the first prize. I received personal letter and the address where should I come into Melbourne. And then when this was one of the evaluating professor, he said, we received 56 manuscripts, we reduced it to 11, and now I will just say a few words about this 11. So he said 11, 10, 9, 8, and I said, oh my God, I will be somewhere in the 20s. And never expecting that.
Yes.
And he came to 2, and he shouted, Paul Cheshler, no, Heil Hitler, first prize. I was incredible surprise.
Wow.
Incredible surprise to me. Shock, and then thanksgiving to God, because they told me, remove from this book this religious aspect, because this book will not get any attention. I said, no way. And yet this professor, one of these professors, came up to me and he said, Paul, this woman in chapter 25, she must have a great faith in God and trust in God.
Boy.
Even that was impressing him.
Yeah.
So I'm very glad that it happened this way.
That's great. Well, praise God for your faithfulness in standing strong for that and getting that recognition. If you are interested in getting a hold of this book, you can find it at hopeshop.com. You can also find it, as we say, wherever good Christian books are sold. It is around the place here in Australia. So, hey, thank you so much, Paul Chesler. I really appreciate your time, and thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you. Pleasure to do so.
Look, I have to confess something, Dora.
Yeah.
I was pleasantly surprised by that interview.
Okay.
Yeah, because at first I thought, oh, here we go, an old guy's story about the war. Is it really going to be that interesting?
Okay.
But I stand corrected. It was great.
Yeah, it's a great book, and he is such a lovely man.
Yeah,
it was awesome to
was.
meet him. Stay with us. There's more InFocus Recouched coming your way straight after the break.
We live our lives running around, rarely stopping to ask ourselves where we're going and what our final destination is. In the end, our lives become little more than routine. Step beyond and discover a path that offers comfort, love and hope. Visit hopeoffer.com/step beyond or call 1300 300 389 for your free copy today.
Looking back, I can see all those happy memories didn't happen by chance. I wish I knew then what I know now. I should have asked more questions, got more advice. I didn't realise how much you sacrificed. Now I'm a parent, I see everything you did for me. Thank you.
We're going to start with some soybeans. Use some chickpeas, an onion, you have a teaspoon of salt, slice some tomatoes, slice some cucumber, some red onion just to give it a bit of freshness. So just make little falafels like this. They just smell amazing. Let's make our tahini dressing. Let's get in some tomatoes, cucumbers, some falafels. Drizzle some of this lovely dressing. All you need to do is roll it up and you've got a delicious lunch for your family.
Hi, welcome back. We're going to check out a segment we did with Trafford Fisher a while back about how to achieve greatness.
Okay.
Some of us are great already, of course.
Oh, I should have seen that one coming.
Really interesting, isn't it? Most of us want and have a strong desire to be happy, to have that sense of greatness, achieving, being successful. What are some of the things that can sometimes hinder that for us?
I think there's a number of things, Danielle, that can mess up that journey. And we all want to be great, certainly want to be happy.
Yeah.
And greatness, I guess, is another whole issue, isn't it? How are we great? I think if we can reflect on that as how can we make a difference in other people's lives? How can we achieve that sense? I think sometimes when something is readily available, we don't always go after an alternative.
Yeah.
So if it's available, so I choose to do that. So I think we've got to fight that a bit. If just by choosing something, well, it's available, so I'll choose it. We need to know what may not be available.
And I guess, the reality is anyone that's gone on to do great things has sort of thought outside the box in reality.
No question. Some of the most creative people, exactly.
Yeah.
They actually ask that question, what aren't we doing, and let's find a way. So look outside the box, exactly, see what's not available. I think another one is sometimes we aren't aware that we can be great. We can make a difference. Oh, well, I can't do much. And I remember as a young guy myself, well, I've got no great skills, But we need to say, no, I can learn, I can find ways of doing it. So I think ignorance, we can't use that as an excuse. We've got to step outside that one.
Do you think a big one in that is just being willing to even try?
You take a risk.
Yeah, failing forward, so to speak.
Yeah. Failing doesn't mean we're a failure.
No.
You know, I can fail at doing something, but I'm not a failure. I've just learned how not to do it.
Yeah.
So to keep going. I think another one is don't take it to a committee.
Yeah.
There's the old joke about committees. Yeah.
Are you a board member or a board member?
Yeah, look, serious. I think seek advice by all means, but keep it out of the committee for as much as we can. Sometimes too, a bit like the availability when we're comfortable. You know, if we're comfortable, achieving greatness might be a bit more of a challenge because, you know, if we're just comfortable, I mean, why would you want to do something different if you've got 300 TV channels and you're sitting in your recliner?
Yeah.
You know, get out and get uncomfortable. I think that's a bit of a key. The other one, Dan, is sometimes when we're already in momentum. Right? If we're rolling along and we think, I'm in momentum and doing well, but sometimes that's called a rut. And sometimes we attach that to the name and call it a career. You know, you know, momentum doesn't necessarily mean we're doing great or we're going to be great because we can be going in the wrong direction. So every now and then we need to stop and say, hey, what for in marriage? And our personal relationships, and we got momentum, but is it in the right direction? And I think lastly, passivity is a bit of a killer. I've got my own little saying, you know, well, it's not my saying, but I love using it. A dead fish floats with the stream, a live one swims against the current.
Wow,
and in
that's
relationships, in business, in work, in home life, sometimes we just float along. And so many marriages, my experience has been couples just float along rather than saying, hey, let's just stop, let's just do a check. So we've got to be active rather than passive.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great advice once again, Trafford.
Thank you.
Well, there you go, Dora. Even you could possibly be a little more awesome if you put those tips into practice.
Maybe. Stay with us. There's more InFocus Recouched coming straight up after the break.
Father, I can't connect the dots through the little that I understand. What words can I say to reach you? How can I know that you are there, listening, hearing, caring? My words are broken, weak, and powerless. But I know your power is limitless. What can I say?
Planning your future can be a daunting task. What you want to do, who you want to be, and the road ahead can often be unpredictable. No one really knows what the future holds. Avondale. It's education designed for life.
There are funny breed historians poking around in the details of the past while the rest of us are worrying about the future or just trying to get through today.
Yeah, but every so often a story from our history breaks into our awareness and helps us realise we've still got a lot to learn.
Yeah. Enter Fighting Mac. Well, I have to confess, after visiting Auschwitz, I'm not too excited about military history and wars and things of that sort, but I'm developing a little bit of a soft spot for this guy, William Fighting Mac Mackenzie. And to tell us about it is Dr. Daniel Reno from Avondale College of Higher Education. How are you, Daniel?
I'm very well, thank you.
It's a pretty reasonably hefty book.
Well, it deserves to be a hefty book because he was a hefty man.
Literally? Or
literally and metaphorically, in every way, he was a giant.
Okay. Now, when we think about Anzac and Gallipoli, you know, we think about Simpson and his donkey, and everyone's heard that legend.
Right.
But who's this guy? Where does he come from?
Well, this guy was the real legend. Strangely enough, Simpson and his donkey weren't hugely well known on Gallipoli.
Okay.
He was more famous in Australia. But this man was an absolute legend, not just on Gallipoli, but in Egypt beforehand, in France, and for 20 years after the war. It didn't matter where Mackenzie went, he got mobbed by former soldiers and their families. Absolutely adored.
Okay. So William Mackenzie was a Salvation Army chaplain, is that correct?
That's right.
Yep.
He's not a likely candidate to be what some journalists called probably the most popular Anzac from the First World War.
Wow. Why was he so popular?
Well, I guess it's a function of his personality and his commitment. As I mentioned, he's a big man physically. He imposes himself just by his presence. But he's also extremely charismatic. And when you think about it, your typical Anzac, you're thinking of a bit of a larrikin, loves drinking, gambling, probably fighting a bit, womanising.
The sort of hard-bitten soldier.
That's it. Cynical.
Boys out for a bit of a lark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't think of these men as being religious at all. Now, confront them with a man who spends the best of his energy trying to convert them to Jesus Christ. What reaction do you think you're going to get from these Anzacs?
Yeah, a wowzer, especially a salvo. I mean, they don't even drink, and, you know, you'd imagine there would have been a lot of antipathy there.
He's a legend. They adore him.
Yeah.
Now, you think about the odds. What kind of man can stand for God, be opposed to most of the things the Anzacs do for entertainment, and be worshipped by them? They just loved him. And it's a function of his charismatic personality, his talent for organising entertainments and diversions, incredible hard work, wonderful sense of humour. And he was a real man's man, you know. He's in his mid-40s. The average Anzac is in his mid-20s.
Okay. So a bit of a father figure, a bit of a mentor figure.
He can outmarch them.
Oh, wow.
He can outshoot them.
Yep.
He can dig trenches faster than they can. There is nothing they do that he doesn't do.
Right.
On marches, he'd walk alongside soldiers half his age who were collapsing from exhaustion.
Yep.
And he'd carry their packs, maybe 2 or 3 packs, and keep up the pace. I mean,
wow.
A man like that, they just had such respect for him.
So that they could put up with him, like when he was around Cairo, wasn't he, like dragging them out of brothels and saying, come on, let's do something a little more wholesome?
Well, every chaplain preached against the brothels and the cheap, nasty alcohol of Cairo. But Mackenzie was the only one who actually did something about it. He actually went down at night and would pull the men out of the brothels and put them on the tram back home. Now, he fully expected to be stabbed by the touts. He wasn't. But the famous Australian historian C.E.W. Bean actually credits Mackenzie with saving the lives and the reputations of thousands of Australians because of his work in keeping them out of the brothels.
Wow. Now, obviously he's a bit of a tough guy. You know, this is the era of muscular Christianity, obviously.
Yes.
They called him Fighting Mac. That was his nickname. How did that come about?
Well, there are various stories as to how it came about, and the bottom line is I don't know which one is true. He was certainly a bit of a fighting lad. He loved fighting in school. There are stories of him fighting on the boat out from Scotland when his family emigrated.
When you say fighting, what you mean, like scraps over issues? Or?
Yes, just getting into fisticuffs. I mean,
okay.
He's a very energetic personality.
Yep.
He's big for his age. He's got huge fists. As an adult, he compared them to a leg of lamb, his fist.
Okay.
So, and robust. And prior to his conversion, he wasn't scared to use his physique to get what he wanted.
Didn't mind throwing his weight around.
Yeah. And there are stories that he boxed in boxing tournaments with soldiers. I cannot pin any of those stories down, so I don't know if they are true. I suspect that if they were, someone would have written about it.
Sure.
I mean, if your chaplain knocks you out in a boxing contest, I reckon somewhere...
Maybe that's the sort of thing you wouldn't write home about, Daniel.
Oh, well, but somebody watching probably would have.
Yes, that's true.
I cannot find it. I just can't find it.
Okay.
But he got that reputation as fighting Mac. He stayed as close to the front line as he could. Chaplains were supposed to be in the rear lines.
Right.
He did everything he could to be right in the front line. At Gallipoli, his dugout was the closest to the wire of anybody's.
Okay.
And he did that quite deliberately. He was just attracted to action. Yeah.
So during the actual Gallipoli campaign, I mean, it obviously wasn't all, you know, concerts and boxing matches or whatever. Men were dying, you know, thousands died.
Yes.
In terms of his role as a chaplain and providing spiritual support to those young guys who would have been incredibly traumatised, what do we know about how that went?
Well, again, it's on Gallipoli that he really makes his name.
Yep.
And it's for a combination of just the encouragement, the buoyancy that he brought to soldiers who were suffering from the effects of war, and his courage. For instance, the attack on Lone Pine, the very famous attack on the 6th of August, he went over the top behind the troops, not immediately after them, but while the fighting was still going on. He was in the trenches with the fighting going on just ahead of him, sorting the dead from the wounded, administering first aid, praying with them. There's a story that he tells, actually, of a young soldier who came to him the night before the attack and said, look, I've drifted away from God. I want to find him again. How do I know I'm right with God?
Yeah.
And Mackenzie prayed and talked with him for quite some time. Well, 2 days later, Mackenzie found his body in no man's land at Lone Pine, buried him, and took the letter from his pocket that young soldier had written to his mother, saying, I've given my heart to God.
Wow.
I belong to him. And
Incredible.
Mackenzie posted that letter to the young soldier's mum in Scotland.
That would have been an incredible comfort.
It was. And a deeply moving experience for Mackenzie. I mean, the tragedy of losing that young man, but knowing that he was eternally right with God,
Boy.
that he had a future.
Incredible. So how do we get hold of this book if we're interested in having a read?
Well, Christian bookshops will have it. Koorong, ABCs. We are hoping distributors, secular distributors will also be stocking it, so keep an eye on your secular bookshops. Mind you, ask in the secular bookshops. That's a good way for them to stock a book about one of our Anzac Christian heroes, the most famous fighting man in the AIF that we've now forgotten.
Yeah, wow. There you go. So check it out. The man the Anzacs revered. The most amazing Anzac story you've never heard. So thanks so much today, Daniel, for coming in and sharing this. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Ken.
So cool. All those untold stories that we got to hear today, William Mackenzie as well as Paul Chesler.
Yeah. I think in peaceful times, Dora, your faith can be kind of, abstract, theoretical maybe, but when you're literally faced with life and death in a situation like a war, well, it's then that you really get to see what your faith is made of.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? How would I cope in that kind of situation?
Oh, yeah, true. That's a pretty massive concept to chew through, isn't it? Well, we're out of time for this week, so you do have some time to chew through that if you need to.
Thanks so much for being with us on the couch this week. All the best until we see you next time.
God bless.